The hazards and dangers of Christians in times of persecution arise not so much from their sufferings as from the temptations that always are present in and planted by Satan in their sufferings. For the most part, sufferings and temptations go together. Therefore, it is advisable that those who are in or expect to be called to sufferings dive into the mysteries of temptations and be well acquainted with the enemy's designs on them. Paul was, and he supposes all others who engage in the same cause to be as well. We are not ignorant of his devices. 2 Corinthians 2:11. Knowing the methods of temptations contributes a great advantage to suffering saints. First, those who are well acquainted with the methods of temptation will be better able to detect the first approaches and beginnings of it, and a temptation discovered is more than half conquered. It is a special trick of Satan to shuffle in his temptations as indiscernibly as possible into the soul, for he knows that in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. Proverbs 1:17. Therefore he ordinarily makes a suffering season to be a tempting season, because suffering, like fire, makes iron able to be formed and used, usually puts the soul into turmoil and distraction, and so gives them an advantage to tempt the soul with less suspicion and greater success. But skillful Christians who are acquainted with Satan's wiles will discern when they begin to enter into temptation, as Christ expresses it in Luke 22:46, and be able to stop the temptation when it first rises, when it is weakest and most easily broken. Undoubtedly one reason why so many fall by temptation is that it has taken hold within them, and it prevailed far before it is discovered to be a temptation. Second, those who are well acquainted with Satan's methods of tempting will not only discern it sooner than others, but will also know their work and duty, and how to manage the conflict with it, which is a great matter. There are many poor souls that labor under strong temptations and do not know what to do. They go up and down complaining from Christian to Christian, while judicious Christians besiege the throne of grace with strong cries. 2 Corinthians 12:8. Keep their watch. Luke 22:46. And countermine the temptation, assaulting it by mortifying the corruption that Satan assaults by temptation. 1 Corinthians 9:27. Last, to name no more, those who are best acquainted with the mystery of temptation and can maintain their ground against it will be enduring Christians under persecution, and victorious Christians over it. This is the main design of Satan in raising persecution against the saints. It is not so much their blood that he thirsts after, as it is their fall by temptation. And all persecutions are designed by him to introduce his temptations. These work on our fear, and fear drives us into his trains and snares. Proverbs 29:25. The devil's work in raising persecution is as a fowler's work in beating a bush at night after he has spread a net. He frightens the birds out of their hiding places to catch them in the net. Those who understand that are not easily moved by even the strongest opposition from their place and duty, and so are likely to prove the most constant and invincible Christians in times of persecution. Since all persecutions are intended as means to promote temptation, how necessary is it to have skill and insight into these designs of Satan, and so advantages you to frustrate his designs in both. How necessary is it that you should be taught where the strength of temptation lies, and how to resist so strong and dangerous temptations that your sufferings are intended to usher in and make way for. In this chapter, then, it will not be untimely or inappropriate to show you where the force and efficacy of temptation lies, and what you are to do when such temptation assaults you in your suffering hour. You may ask, in what does the efficacy and power of temptation lie? I answer that it lies principally in three things. 1. The efficacy and power of temptation lie in the kind and nature of the temptation itself. For it is most certain that all temptations are not equally forcible and dangerous. Some like these that follow are usually more successful than others. 1. Strange and unusual temptations are usually successful. I do not mean those that no one has ever been troubled with before. For there is not a dart in Satan's quiver that has not been flung at the breasts of other saints before it was leveled at ours. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. By strange and unusual, I mean those that the people of God are rarely troubled with, and possibly were never vexed with before. These are more dangerous because they daunt and bewilder the soul, and ordinarily produce despondency, even as some strange disease would do that we do not know what to make of, nor can we learn about from the sickness of others. 2. Temptations that are adapted and suited to your own sin or evil disposition, or another kind of dangerous temptation. It is the most dangerous crisis of temptation, when it tries you there. If you are not truly changed by grace, you will fall irrecoverably by the root. Or if your faith is sincere, without special assistance and extraordinary vigilance, compare David in 1 Samuel 16:12 with him again in 2 Samuel 11:2. 3, a temptation is most dangerous when it is a spiritual temptation. It arises indiscernibly out of your Christian duties. These are least suspected because temptations usually come from the strength and liveliness of our corruptions. But these come from the slaughter and conquest we make of them. Duties and the expansions of them, which are the poison of other lusts, prove the food and fuel of this temptation. The more covert and close any temptation is, the more dangerous it is. These are less suspected because temptations usually come from the strength and liveliness of our corruptions, but these come from the slaughter and conquest we make of them. Duties and the expansions of them, which are the poison of other lusts, prove the food and fuel of this temptation. The more covert and close any temptation is, the more dangerous it is. The strength and efficacy of temptations lie also in the craft and strategy of Satan in managing the temptation. This is why his strategies are called wiles, methods, and devices. And Satan himself is called an old serpent, and the rest of his deep and desperate tricks. These are remarkable. 1. To manage his temptation, Satan employs those who are least suspected and who have the greatest influence. He used a teacher, Galatians 2:14, a wife, Genesis 3:6, Job 2:9, friends, Acts 21:13. The devil knows that it's a bad business, and so must make the best of it. Paul's sorest trial was by his dearest friends. 2. Satan orderly arranges his temptations, beginning with little things first, then by degrees working over to greater. His first motions are commonly most modest. If he revealed the depth of his design at first, it would startle the soul and make it reply as Hazael, "Is your servant a dog, that he should do this great thing?" 2 Kings 8, verse 13. It is far easier for Satan to gain what he wants by parts than by pushing for it all at once. 3, Satan attempts to engage the soul on his own ground. He tries to tempt you from your station and duty, where God sat and expects to find you. Satan knows that while you are with God, God is with you, 2 Chronicles 15, verse 2. While you abide in the place you were placed, you abide with God, 1 Corinthians 7:24. While you are there, the promise is a good defense to keep off all his darts. His fishermen spread their nets in the river, and then beat the fishes out of their hiding spots and caverns. So does Satan. Satan does not present the temptation until the soul is prepared to receive it. He loves to strike when the iron is hot. He lets their troubles come to a height. He brings them to the prison the gallows, or fire, and then offers them deliverance, Hebrews 11:35-37. Number 5, Satan tires our souls with a prolonged continuation of temptations. What he cannot win by a sudden storm, he hopes to gain by a tedious siege. 40 days he assaulted the captain of our salvation, Mark 1:13. It truly is a wonder when the soul that has been tried long does not yield at last. The rod of the wicked shall not rest upon the lot of the righteous, lest the righteous put forth their hands unto iniquity. Psalm 125:3. Number 6, Satan falls most violently on them when they are at the lowest, and most prostrate in their spirits and comforts. This is how he assaulted Job with the temptation to curse God and die, when he sat in that deplorable state on the dunghill, Job 2:8-9. Satan loves to fall on us as Simeon and Levi did on the Shechemites, when we are sore and wounded. So you will ordinarily find times of divine desertions to be times of diabolical temptation. As the wild beasts of the desert come out of their dens at night, and then roar after their prey. Psalm 104:20. So does Satan, when a soul seems to be overtaken and lost in the darkness of spiritual troubles. Last, the strength and efficacy of Satan's temptations lie in the secret correspondence Satan holds with our closely held enemies, our evil desires and depravities. Were it not for these domestic traitors, he could not surprise us so easily. Satan could do nothing in Christ because he found nothing to fasten a temptation on. He was like a crystal glass filled with pure fountain water. Even if he should have been exceptionally agitated and shaken by temptation, no filthy sediment could appear. But now we have an enemy within that holds intelligence with Satan without, and this would prove a devil to us even if there were no other devil to tempt us. James 1:14-15. It is a fountain of temptation in itself. Matthew 15:19. And the chief instrument by which Satan does all his tempting work. 2 Peter 1:4. Our many passions and affections are the handles of his temptations. Everything, says Epictetus, has two handles to take it by. Our affections are the handles of our souls. The temptation of self-confidence and pride takes hold of a daring and forward disposition. The temptation of apostasy snares a timid disposition, and so on. These inbred lusts go over to the enemy in the day of battle and fight against the soul, 1 Peter 2:11. This is a more dangerous enemy than the devil. It is true they both work against us, but with a double difference. Satan works externally and objectively, but lust works internally and physically, as it is capable of affecting us physically. Sin, taken occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manner of all concupiscence, Romans 7:8. Yes, it is a subtle enemy that does his business shrewdly. Sin deceived me, Romans 7:11. It betrays with a kiss, strangles with a silk rope. Satan's agents are sitting at the council table in our own hearts, and they're effectively carrying out his designs. Satan is a restless and perpetual enemy. There is no ridding your hands of him. He sometimes put to flight by resistance, James 4:7, and sometimes ceases his temptations, Luke 4:13. But even when Satan ceases to tempt and inject, our evil desires continue to irritate and tempt. Where we are, this temptation will be. It is our sad lot to be tied to it and perpetually assaulted by it, Romans 7:24. We may say of it as Hannibal said of Marcellus, that it is never quiet, whether conqueror or conquered. It is a potent enemy too. It hauls us away to the commission of sin. It seizes the storehouse of the soul and delivers up the members, to be weapons of unrighteousness, Romans 6:13. Now you see in what the efficacy and power of temptation consist. And you who are, or who expect to be sufferers for Christ, need to be greatly concerned that you are acquainted with these things, and know where the strength of your enemy lies. But how can suffering saints manage themselves in a suffering hour, so as not to be captured by temptations? This brings me to the second thing I promised, that is, to prescribe some rules for the escaping or conquering of those temptations that are incidentals to a suffering state. 1. Work to cut off the advantages of temptations before they come. It is our inordinate love of life, estate, liberty, and ease that gives the temptations so much strength over us. Do not overvalue them, and you will more easily part with them. Revelation 12, verse 11. Oh, mortify the love of self and the love of the world. Let your heart be loosened and weaned from them, and the temptation will lose its strength. Rule number 2. Secure for yourselves an interest in the heavenly glory. Once you clearly see your property in the kingdom above, you will set lighter and lower all things on earth. Hebrews 10, verse 34 is a full, significant, and relevant text. For you had compassion of me and my bonds, and took joyfully the spoiling of your goods, knowing in yourselves that you have in heaven a better and an enduring substance. It is our darkness and uncertainty about interest and glory that makes us cling so fast to these below. Rule 3. It is better for you to fall into any suffering than to fall into the least sin. Settle this principle so firmly in your heart that you will never depart from it. All will acknowledge this, but how few practice it. Oh, that you would accept, understand, and use it. Suffering is a particular external and temporal evil, but sin is a universal, internal, and everlasting evil. Rule number 4. Believe that God has cursed and blasted all the ways of sin, so that they will never be a shelter to any soul that flies to them for refuge. Proverbs 13:15, Mark 8:35. The way of transgressors is hard, and a difficult way. There is no security in the way of iniquity. Those who run from suffering to sin run from a seeming to the real danger, from the painted to the living lion. Rule 5. Live up to the principle that says there is no better policy than sincerity and godly simplicity. This will preserve and secure you when carnal wisdom will expose and betray you. Sinful practice never thrives with saints. Rule 6. Consider with sorrow what the consequence of yielding up yourselves to temptations will be. The name of God will be dreadfully reproached. A fatal stumbling block will be laid before the blind world. The hearts of many upright ones will be made sad. The fall of one who professes Christ is when a standard bearer faints, and it will be a dreadful wound to your own conscience. 1 hour sleep of security may keep you many days and nights waking on the rack of horror. Rule 7. Never engage a temptation in your own strength. Go out against it trembling in yourselves and relying on divine aids and assistance. What? Are you to grapple with spirits? To accept the challenge of principalities and powers? Or what is your strength that you should hope? Rule 8. Let the days of your temptation be days of mighty cries and supplications. This is what Paul did, 2 Corinthians 12, verse 8. Your best posture to wrestle with temptation is on your knees. Psalm 109, verse 4. Rule 9. Consider long those choice encouragements God has laid up in the world for such a time. Though he gives Satan permission to tempt you, he still holds you in his hand to preserve you. While Satan is sifting and trying you on earth, Christ is interceding for you in heaven, and an eternal reward is laid up for those who overcome. Here is this reward: won or lost. Rule 10. Last, be content until God opens the door out of your temptations. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. The time of the promise will come. Acts 7:17. Wait for it, though it tarries and seems to be delayed. In the end, it will speak and not lie. Habakkuk 2, verse 3. There was a secret door in the ark, though it could not be seen while the waters prevailed. And there is also one in all your temptations, though at present it may not be discernible to you. With this, I have brought you one step closer to Paul's blessed state. Oh, diligently make yourselves ready for suffering.